a former NFL quarterback, plus some current NFL coaches and general managers, plus some former ones, took some interesting yet very predictable stances on Lamar Jackson. We talk about that, Ravens training camp updates, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today on this Tuesday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day are free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show here, Monday through Friday on Locked On Ravens. Plus, we have other episodes for you, like bonus episodes on the weekends when there are headlines that permit. We go live after every single Ravens game, after every single piece of Ravens big news. And we also have new Locked On Ravens watch-alongs that are during games. We react live to games. We also have the post-game shows and some reactions, and the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, which is live Mondays and Thursdays. We'll have Saturday instead of Thursday this week, with the preseason game for the Ravens being on Saturday. We have a lot to dive into here on this Locked On Ravens episode. And of course, thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. In the final part of the show, we're going to dive into the Ravens injury saga situation here. Robert Longerbeam and his injury, which just has been all over the place with the Ravens, plus some other players still not practicing for Baltimore, and kind of diving into how important it is for the Ravens to stay healthy this season as a whole. In the second part of the show, we're going to be diving into more training camp notes and updates from Monday. So we'll have everything, some offensive highlights, some defensive highlights as well. But in the first part of the show, we're going to be diving into NFL players, former quarterback, as well as current coaches and executives taking very interesting yet predictable stances on Lamar Jackson. We had Mike Sando's NFL quarterback tier list drop, which comes out every year. And also Dan Orlovsky made some comments there. So we'll talk about that as well. But before we do all that, I want to acknowledge something I've been leading up to for a while here. Today does mark my 6-year anniversary of hosting Locked On Ravens. This is episode 1,572 consecutively for me here on the show on the weekday. I've never missed an episode ever over the course of my 6 years hosting this show. It is one of the accomplishments I'm most proud of in my life, to be able to say, like, come on here every single day with consistency and provide daily Ravens updates and coverage. I strive to be my best every day here, and I've grown a lot. And it's not just me that's grown. The show has grown, the community has grown, and none of this is possible, would have been possible, without the support I get every single day. And it, was very humbling to look back on kind of my first few episodes. I actually listened to a little bit of my first ever one before I hopped on here and recorded this. And I'll tell you, from the equipment to how I just grew as a, someone that covers the team here, it means the world that I've gotten this opportunity. And I can thank a billion people for leading me up to this point here and everything that's led to this moment. But every single anniversary of the show, it always kind of, it's a moment I like to reflect on. I used to actually play the first ever episode I had in the final part of the show. We don't do that anymore. If you want to listen to how much different that is compared to what today's shows are, you can go back. It was August 12th, 2019. I talked about Kari Vedvik and that trade that happened. So, we've come a long way. The Ravens have come a long way. That was Lamar's first year as a starter. Now we're entering Lamar year 7 as a starter, year 8 as a pro, which is just absolutely insane. Coming up here is my 7th season of covering the Ravens. So it's been an incredible journey. I can't wait to continue on it. And just thank you. What I want to say is thank you to all the people who watch, all the people who listen, and thank you to you who, it really is my motivation to come on here and provide the best content I can each and every single day. So thank you. I can't say it enough, but now let's move on to the Ravens content. Let's start with Dan Orlovsky and his list. I actually didn't know Dan Orlovsky did this last year. Apparently this is the second straight year that Dan has done this. He ranked quarterbacks by trait, so best arm, accuracy, and more. And actually the most controversial part of this list was he left off Patrick Mahomes in his mechanics list. Patrick Mahomes, he did 10 quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks. Mahomes was not on there. But we'll just go through the categories and I'll read off where Lamar is in them. Then we can talk about it in a little more detail. Arm strength, Orlovsky had Lamar at number 4. Ball placement, he had Lamar at number 3. Then you have mechanics. Lamar was at number 4. Decision-making with the football, Lamar was at number 3. Pocket presses, Lamar was at number 2. Rushing ability, Lamar number 1. Second reaction ability, Lamar number 1. So in every single passing category, Joe Burrow was number 1 except for arm strength, where Joe Burrow is number 7. Dan Orlovsky also made a comment about Joe Burrow earlier in the day that Dan Orlovsky said that there was no one better in the league throwing the football right now. So I think Dan Orlovsky are already making an early MVP impression there for Joe Burrow. And look, Joe Burrow is a super talented quarterback, and Orlovsky on his list gave Lamar a lot of credit for a lot of things that he is able to do. You know, he was very complimentary of Lamar throughout the article, you know, talked a lot about how even just for things like ball placement, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen took the biggest leaps in those areas. You know, decision-making with the football, he was complimentary of Lamar as well. The third straight list where he has Burrow number 1, but Allen and Jackson are on his tail. Jackson led the league in wide open target percentage with 34.4% of his throws targeting receivers with 5 or more yards of separation. So he said, see the open man, throw to the open man, which is obviously a part of that as well. You know, I think Lamar has a super strong arm, and a lot of these other guys do here too. I mean, you have a lot of ability there, and then there's kind of a fall off. And obviously with the rushing and the second chance ability, Lamar is certainly there. In terms of, you know, for Joe Burrow, there's no one better in the league throwing the football right now. I understand why people might think that, but at the same time, some of the things that Lamar gets criticized for and punished for, Joe Burrow does not, one of which is playoffs, and the other is the weapons that he has around him. Joe Burrow has the best receiver duo in the league. Lamar got criticized crazy amounts last season for having the core that he had around him. But I'm not going to be too picky about that. And I think that there is really nice added context in here as well about what Dan thinks about Lamar. And, you know, with the rushing ability, Dan made it a point because I don't think some lists include this, or some people think about it with quarterbacks. He said that rushing ability is a massive part of the modern NFL quarterback. The best in the game excel here. And he said there's a lot of different ways that it can come about. There are a lot of different ways that quarterbacks can make an impact with their legs. And he said that, you know, he still has Jackson at the top of the list because he's fantastic on called runs and scrambles. And then second reaction ability, he said Lamar and Patrick Mahomes are both elite on second reaction plays, especially when the play breaks down. So if you want to go a little bit more into detail, I think when you add everything up, I think Lamar edges everybody out in terms of overall score. Orlovsky didn't have this, but if my math is correct, and I hope it is, I really hope it is, I think Lamar got the most total points out of all quarterbacks, especially because he was ranked number 1 in both rushing ability and second reaction ability, whereas Joe Burrow on that list, I mean, Joe was 7 in second reaction ability, and he didn't even make the top 10 in terms of rushing ability. So I do believe Lamar's number 1 in that category in terms of points, but it's still interesting considering, you know, Dan was Dan was a Lamar supporter, but then last year happened and he just became all for Josh Allen. Of course, we know that he did work in I believe it was just a minor role with the Bills and their media department or something along those lines as, you know, a contributor or something. And that obviously got a lot of attention. Dan was very in on the Josh Allen. So that in itself caused a lot of controversy, but we know Lamar is one of the best to do it right now. And Dan Orlovsky did give him his flowers, despite saying that he believes Joe Burrow, there's no one better throwing the football than him. But I'm curious to see, because Joe obviously threw for more yards, but Lamar had the edge in other areas as well. So, you know, there are two sides to every story here. Plus, in terms of head-to-head, we know that Lamar is best in that category. But again, Joe Burrow is really talented. Lamar Jackson is really talented. Josh Allen is really talented. Patrick Mahomes is really talented. Those are undisputed, the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, you can put them in any order you want to. I personally have Lamar number 1, but there are a lot of different ways that people define quarterback seasons and where quarterbacks rank on lists. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll dive into Mike Sando's list of coaches, executives. They all voted on where they believe the quarterback position is today. So stay tuned. We'll get to that as well as Ravens training camp updates coming up on Locked On Ravens. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Ravens are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. One of my favorite features, new guillotine leagues. They just dropped, and every week, the lowest scoring team is eliminated, and the last one standing wins. So whether you're all in on something new, or you're like sticking to head-to-head leagues or jumping into public leagues, Yahoo has got you covered. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you on this Tuesday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today for my 6-year anniversary of the show. Big accomplishment for me, right? It's a bit, I'm not going to lie, it's a big accomplishment, right? I'm really happy about it. We got the green screen action going on. We're still trying to figure out the background, the situation with that. It's a work in progress, preseason for everybody, as I say, right? So, this was the old background. We're trying to move on to bigger and better backgrounds here on Locked On Ravens and setup. So, this is the construction, the construction background for what we're going to hopefully have before the regular season, hopefully sooner than that, on Locked On Ravens. We talked about Dan Orlovsky and his comments on Lamar Jackson, his rankings for Lamar. Well, Mike Sando, every year, he drops an NFL tier list for quarterbacks, and it is a combination of coaches, executives, and others around the league voting on these players. And, Mike is great. I've had him on multiple times. Hopefully I can get Mike back on this week at some point, or maybe even over the weekend on a bonus episode to talk about his list and where everybody had him ranked, Lamar Jackson, that is. So just a little bit of background about this list and how it works. Mike ends up polling a lot of different voters, 50 total. And obviously there are no names here. It's all anonymous. And the panel had 6 general managers, 6 assistant general managers, 6 former general managers, 5 other executives, 8 head coaches, and 19 other coaches, including 15 coordinators. Now this works is quarterbacks are placed in a tier from tier 1 to tier 5. And then the quarterbacks are then ranked by average vote and then placed into tiers based off of those vote distributions. And of course, there are no rookies on this list. So Lamar Jackson finally made the jump into a tier 1 quarterback. It's about time. Lamar was a tier 2 quarterback last season, is an MVP candidate, which was just, he literally won the MVP last year and was a tier 2 quarterback, which I just, I didn't understand it, but that's where the NFL has been on Lamar Jackson. Unfortunately, Lamar made the jump into tier 1, had one of the most voted tier 1 players he was one of the most voted tier 1 players in the league here, and had one of the highest jumps in terms of tier 1 votes. He only had 23 last season. He had 46 tier 1 votes this year, only 4 second tier votes. I still don't know how in today's game and with what Lamar has done, you vote him as a tier 2 quarterback, but I guess it is what it is. But Lamar Jackson was not the highest rated quarterback on this list. He wasn't the highest tier, but he was not the highest rated quarterback. And I guess this just is where the NFL is on Lamar Jackson. It was honestly somewhat predictable. It's unfortunate it was this predictable. But Lamar Jackson comes in as the 4th best quarterback again in the NFL. Josh Allen was 3, and then Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes were tied at 2 and 1. So, you can throw whatever you want to there. Look, let's read off some of the stuff about Lamar first of all. He said there was a defensive coordinator who said Lamar has done a really great job, and I do not think it's been him that has let them down in the playoffs. It's been other parts of the team. He has taken leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. There was another voter who said there is a maturity of how he plays the game and when he turns on his magic. We played them, and he was almost perfect that day. He is definitely a 1. And honestly, you look at this list and a lot of the voters, and I'm not saying names, but like a lot of what was said by the voters, and a lot of people thought Lamar should have won the MVP last season. He's one of these offensive coordinators said, quote, it would have been his third. You can't win 3 MVPs, still be in your prime and not be a 1. So this coordinator essentially was accounting for the fact Lamar Jackson had won a 3rd MVP. He was kind of penciling that in for him. And another voter said, quote, there was doubt before because it was off schedule. It was running. It was not sustainable. They had a great defense. They have this. They have that. The offense is about the ball in his hands more to sling it around. And voters also liked Lamar Jackson's improved skills. He said, one defensive coordinator said, quote, I'm a firm 1 on Lamar now. Even last year's game in the playoffs, he brought them back. Mark Andrews drops the ball at the end. Lamar's a total package, a very unique player. So a lot of compliments within this, nothing about Lamar and like, oh, why was he ranked at 4? Then you have, obviously Josh, Joe, and Patrick. And again, it's no, I don't think there is any debate that Lamar, Josh, Joe, and Patrick are the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. Again, you can rank them however you want to. I have Lamar Jackson at number 1 because I think Lamar had the best year last year. He had 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, led the league in a lot of other categories as well. The touchdown percentage, again, was historic. He's had 2 historic level touchdown percentage seasons. He was the first quarterback in NFL history to rush for 900 plus yards and throw for 4,000 plus yards. Not that Josh had a bad year. He was incredible. Joe Burrow had a great season. Patrick Mahomes, honestly, was the one that had the worst season out of those 4 quarterbacks. And so when you look at these lists and you think about, okay, these are the quarterbacks, where are they for 2025? I assume that you're factoring in last season because we hear about, okay, the improvement from the year prior to this past season. But I guess, are we factoring in wins more here because Patrick Mahomes had, the most wins among these guys, and then Josh Allen had more wins than Lamar, but Joe Burrow didn't. So are you factoring in passing yards? Joe Burrow had Lamar beat in that category. I don't really understand that. And that's why, to me, it shouldn't be the way it is, but it is predictable. And this is not the first time with NFL coaches and executives Lamar Jackson has been ranked at number 4 behind Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. It's been Lamar at 4. And I don't know what you weigh, right? When you think about what you weigh, is it playoffs? Like, do playoffs play that big of a factor? Well, if that's the case, why is Joe Burrow number 2? Because I talked about it in the first part of the show. Joe Burrow has had less playoff success than Lamar Jackson recently. It's just that he made the Super Bowl, what is literally all those years ago. But are we talking about that playoff successful? Because if you are, then you got to factor in other things as well, right? You got to factor in Lamar's MVPs like that one voter did say. So these lists, I think, are very subjective. And, obviously we don't know who is being interviewed and not and polled or not. Actually, Matthew Stafford also snuck onto the tier 1 list at number 5, which I think that tier 1 is very clearly just the 4 that I mentioned. I think Stafford probably heads up tier 2. If you think it's Stafford, also Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, CJ Stroud, and Jalen Hurts rounded out the top 10 there. But I mean, what would it take? Would it take a Super Bowl for Lamar? I mean, I think that's what it has to, right? Because you look at the order of operations here. Mahomes, multi-Super Bowl champion. Joe Burrow has made it to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen, AFC championship game against Patrick Mahomes, a couple of those. And then you have Lamar Jackson, who has only made one AFC championship game. Is it literally just playoff descending order for these guys? Is that the most important thing? I think when you're ranking quarterbacks, playoffs should absolutely play a factor in it, but it should not be the only thing that you look at. But we know that Lamar in the postseason, right, he's had great games, but then it's obviously the games that stand out to a lot of people, particularly in the national media, is the ones that he can't get the job done. It's unfair in some senses, but also not in others, where I think Lamar does deserve blame and criticism for some of his playoff performances and moments. I'm not saying Lamar's perfect in the playoffs. I'm not. But it just feels like, again, Lamar is subjected to criticisms that others aren't. And that is the predictability of it. It's the sad part about it. And, I guess there's not a lot that you can do about it, but I don't know what else Lamar has to do. I guess it is the Super Bowl. And that is the defining factor in why he is ranked below these guys. So I don't know. It is what it is there. Lamar's still an incredible quarterback. A lot of nice things said about him in that Mike Sando list. And again, I hope to have Mike on this week or over the weekend to talk about the list and kind of how he feels about Lamar Jackson. But training camp continues on for the Baltimore Ravens. They had practice on Monday after a great Lamar Jackson day on Sunday. So there were a lot of highlights, both offensively and defensively. Malaki Starks had an interception on Lamar Jackson during a red zone drill in the back of the end zone. He picked off a pass intended for Keith Kirkwood over the middle. Second time he's had an interception in the red zone in training camp. He came down with an interception in the end zone during the first week of camp. Then he also had an interception in one-on-ones during Sunday's practice. So we know that Malaki is going to be all over the place for the Ravens this season. I'm really, really excited for him, especially filling in next to Kyle Hamilton, being able to use his versatility. He's showing that off in training camp. He hasn't been like a highlight player every single day, right? He hasn't flashed like that. But I still think that he's just going to be a really sound, solid, high floor, high ceiling player that maybe won't be like the flashiest guy in the NFL, but will show up to work every day, do his job, and be like a 10, 12-year starter at a high level, Pro Bowl, All-Pro type of guy. So good to see Malaki getting on the board. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll continue diving into training camp notes from Monday, as well as getting into the injury situation in Baltimore. Just really weird stuff going on right now on that front. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing the long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. And I'm going to crown my champion in August. This is Locked On Ravens. If you listen to the show, I've been very complimentary of the Ravens roster. I think they're one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. I'm calling it. The Ravens, I think, are going to win the Super Bowl this season. Now, you have to play the games, right? Obviously, it's not just as cut and dry as they're going to win it. But over on FanDuel, they are tied for being the favorites with both the Bills and the Eagles. All three of those teams, Ravens, Bills, Eagles, are plus 700. You got teams like the Chiefs at plus 800, but I'm liking Baltimore's value, and I'm loving Baltimore's roster. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher rounding out the 6-year anniversary of the show for me. It's a crazy thing to look back on all of that here and kind of look at where the Ravens were then compared to where the Ravens are now. I mean, that 2019 team going into the season, I remember it was kind of the expectation was there wasn't one. It was like, all right, who is Lamar Jackson going to be in year 2 of his career? And obviously he showed he was a pretty good football player that year. Winning the MVP, of course, he won it because I started hosting Locked On Ravens, right? We all know that. But crazy. Now Lamar entering year 8 and a veteran in the league. It's unbelievable. So now the Ravens are gearing up for a season that hopefully will result in a Super Bowl. They have the roster to do it. It's just a matter of everything else falling into place. Training camp obviously is a way to continue to build towards the season. And I think they're doing a good job of that so far. Now, in terms of training camp updates, we kind of teased it a little bit in the final part of the second segment of the show, where talked about Malaki a little bit. He had a nice interception on Lamar Jackson. And, John Harbaugh talked about Malaki a little bit, saying that, quote, if you were going to sit there and say, well, it's one of the biggest reasons we drafted him, it's because of his takeaway ability. And we know the Ravens are really focusing on turnovers this season. Going to be a really, really big part of what Baltimore does this year. So really excited about that. Now, DeAndre Hopkins had a really nice play. The longest play of the day was a 40-yard touchdown catch from Lamar during the 2-minute period. Hopkins got to step on Nate Wiggins. And I know the second I say Nate Wiggins, everybody's going to say, man, Nate has been on the end of every single big play. It's been every single one. DeAndre Hopkins seems to have been getting the best of Nate over the course of these days. There's been a lot of concern, it feels like, over both Roger Rosengarten and Nate Wiggins, year 2 Ravens players that need to step up in a big way for them. Look, it's training camp. I get it. There have been some issues with both those guys at times. Nate had a really good practice a couple of days ago, though. It's kind of the volatility of training camp for some of these guys, where not everybody's going to have a great day every single day. And that's kind of the thing where I know that the Ravens posted the Malaki interception on Lamar, and the reaction was, awesome. Malaki picked off Lamar. That's great. Oh, wait, Lamar threw an interception. That's not good. It's always going to have that volatility. So with DeAndre. It's like, oh, that's awesome. DeAndre made an awesome play on Nate Wiggins. And then the other side of that is, shoot, Nate Wiggins got picked on again. So, I still feel confident in Nate. I feel confident in his ability. He hasn't been able to get his head around as much as maybe you'd like to see during these practices over training camp. But, I'm not going to, I try really not to overreact one way or the other to training camp practices. Mark Andrews has been a go-to option for Lamar over the course of camp, and that happened again on Monday where he connected with Mark. Lamar did for a few touchdowns in the red zone and several chunk plays in traffic, and one of which was actually a jump pass between Malaki Starks and Marlon Humphrey over the middle. Now, Humphrey had a great pass breakup on a throw to Zay Flowers in the back corner of the end zone, knocking a ball loose from Zay Flowers, and Humphrey then did the signature sword celebration from Jaire. We know Jaire clarified it. There's a video I put out on social media of him talking to the Ravens game on Thursday. It's a sword, not a seatbelt. Gonna continue to drive that home because people, I think, do still think it's a seatbelt, but Jaire clearing the air on that. And if you remember, Zay had a nice play on Marlon in practice not too long ago. So that was kind of revenge for Marlon there. Trenton Simpson put on his athleticism to good use there on a chase down, tackle into the line of scrimmage on Justice Hill. And then Simpson also beat Joe Noteboom around the edge on a blitz. So really good day from Trenton Simpson, it sounds like, which is awesome. And again, these updates coming from Justin Robertson over at BaltimoreRavens.com, who's done a great job really giving us updates here on the Ravens. Cooper Rush had a perfectly placed off-platform throw to Scotty Washington. Need Cooper to have a much better game on Saturday, obviously, along with Devin Leary. Devontae Walker had a long touchdown in one-on-ones on Ruben Lowry and also had a contested catch on Chidobe Awuzie and Sanusi Kane in coverage on him. So good day from Tez. Brent Urban swatted down a Lamar Jackson pass to the line of scrimmage and did his signature celebration. Aeneas Peebles, he had a day beating Nick Samek for a rush on a quarterback pressure. Keandre Jackson intercepted Cooper Rush on a deep shot down the sideline. So seems like, again, it's not just the stars contributing, and that's been every day. It's the same thing where you also have some of these depth pieces showing up here. And I think a big thing, going back to Brent Urban swatting down the pass from Lamar, I said it during the watch-along, during the post-game all on Thursday, like it's such a big deal for the Ravens to be able to swat those passes down. It is a huge skill to have, something that really just it halts offensive drive momentum, especially because a lot of those throws, especially if they're shorter throws, will probably be for completion. So really nice for them to be able to do that. Now, Keaton Mitchell, Kyle Hamilton, Jaire Alexander, they still do not participate in practice. They continue to deal with minor injuries. But there's been another injury situation that has kind of taken the Ravens by storm here, and that is Robert Longerbeam. Now, of course, Longerbeam, rookie sixth rounder out of Rutgers. He was placed on injured reserve on Monday with an injury, and John Harbaugh was very vague in his answer about just why they did it. Now, there was a report that came out yesterday by Jordan Schultz that revealed that Longerbeam suffered a torn patella tendon. And so then John Harbaugh was asked about that and was like, this is Longerbeam. And then John Harbaugh said, well, in terms of it being a torn patella tendon, define that. That's a little bit vague. I can't really say what he has. It's something that was deemed surgery was the best move for him. He also asked the Ravens employee off to the sideline if he could say what he had and if it was like a HIPAA violation. And I guess the employee said, no, you can't say what it is. Something weird is going on here, and I don't know what it is. A torn patella tendon is not like a vague description. I mean, if you said, oh, it's a knee injury or it's an arm injury or a head injury, that's a vague description of an injury. Getting into the specific of it, that's not vague. It's just, I don't know. Feels kind of weird. I mean, I had said on the show yesterday that I thought it was a stash move. I don't know why the Ravens, do they have to, why they have to keep it so hush-hush. I mean, maybe it is a violation. I don't know. Truly, I don't know. That's why it's just we know that John Harbaugh sometimes with injuries is not the most telling or revealing or does not want to get into it. So it kind of is on par a little bit for, Harbaugh and the Ravens. I remember Rashod Perriman was supposed to be back 5 days after he suffered his injury during offseason workouts, and he never played during his rookie season. So it's not the first time there have been some weird injury descriptions or non-descriptions going around for the Ravens. So obviously prayers up to Robert Longerbeam, most important part. Hopefully he's able to recover and get back on the field for the Ravens next season. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show and celebrating with me here for my 6-year anniversary of the show. Appreciate everybody. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form. And, of course, we'll be back here tomorrow with more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.